You boys be quiet down there!
Over the past 2 decades, the Trails series has become a smash hit for its developer, Nihon Falcom. I'm really looking forward to the latest entry in the series, Kuro no Kiseki, due out later this year in Japan. But what about the larger series that these games are a part of? What is it, and where did it get started? And just like with my video on Ys 1 4 years ago, I'm not just talking about the Legend of Heroes 1. I'm talking about the very first version of Legend of Heroes 1, which was released on Falcom's preferred platform of the time, the NEC PC-88 computer. Since Falcom is widely known as a Japanese RPG developer, it may sound funny, but before the Legend of Heroes, Falcom had never made a traditional turn-based JRPG. Up to that point, they were known for their action RPGs like Ys and Sorcerian. But with the success of series like Enix's Dragon Quest, Falcom producer Yoshio Kiya decided it was time Falcom created their own take on the turn-based JRPG. Kiya was a bit of an odd fellow who had the habit of declaring almost every game he produced to be part of the same series as his 1984 hit Dragonslayer, a practice which led to even the real-time strategy game Lord Monarch somehow being lumped into the series. Seriously, look up the Dragonslayer series sometime if you haven't already, it's crazy. Anyway, in 1989, Kiya released Falcom's first turn-based JRPG and declared it to be the 6th entry in his Dragonslayer series. He called it Dragonslayer, and oh yeah, if you read the fine print, there's also some weird subtitle, The Legend of Heroes. This was to be the first release in the Legend of Heroes series, a series which would eventually grow to be bigger than the original series it had spawned from. So here it is, the original version of Dragonslayer, The Legend of Heroes, for PC-88. First of all, let's take a quick look at the cover and backside of the case. First, I see a warranty and registration card, and wow, there was really a lot of Falcom goods available for mail order around this time. Next, we have an advertisement for Selected Sorcerian. Sorcerian was a Falcom game that was built to be expanded upon with additional scenarios, and Selected Sorcerian was a collection of scenarios made for a contest. On the back of this is actually an unrelated advertisement for older Falcom games that could be purchased at the time via vending machines which wrote floppy disks. Next, oh my god, there's so much stuff in here, so let's just go quickly. Ys 3, a catalog of Falcom music CDs, more Falcom goods, more stuff about Sorcerian expansion scenarios, the main Sorcerian game. This is novels based on Sorcerian. And finally, Star Trader. By the way, after looking at this carefully, it looks like I need to make a correction. In my Star Trader video, I said that the game comes with a mouse pad. It says here that it's actually a disc mat. So, mystery solved, I guess? Next, we have a huge map of the game. I actually found this kind of useful at a few points. There's also a monster manual. This is kind of cool and all, but not very useful. Next is a spell list, and this is actually really necessary since there is no explanation within the game of what any of the spells do until you try them. Next are some floppy disk stickers. I'll explain what these are for in a sec. Finally, we come to the manual, which is in full color and contains some cool illustrations. The game itself is contained on 5 floppy disks, the main program disk, the event disk, and 3 scenario disks. The manual says that the first thing we should do is watch the opening. In order to do that, rather than booting the main program disk, we have to boot the event disk. We get an opening sequence that is mildly impressive for the PC-88. Just like in newer Falcom games, the opening sequence shows the main characters of the game without yet giving any explanation of who they are or how any of the imagery shown here fits into the game. In the BGM, we also first hear the main theme, which will be repeated in the opening and ending music for this game and its sequel. When the opening is over, the game says to insert the program disc in Scenario Disc 1. But before doing that, I want to do the next thing the manual suggests, making backups of the scenario discs. You may have noticed earlier that the 3 scenario discs each have a silver sticker on them. This sticker can be taken off in order to remove write protection. This is because in this game, the scenario discs also double as your user discs. Each of the scenario discs can hold up to 10 game saves. So this is finally the first game I've shown on PC-88 Paradise which allows for more than 1 game save per disc. The fact that these discs also contain the necessary data to run the game means that you don't need to switch discs when you save. However, I don't really want to be writing data directly to my original antique floppy disks, and the manual strongly recommends making a backup of each scenario disk and using those instead. So let's do that. We can access the game's utility menu by booting the event disk while holding the help key. Here let's select the second option, Backup Scenario Disk, and then select Scenario Disk 1. Once this process is finished, we'll have a copy of each of the scenario disks, and of course we can use the provided scenario disk stickers if we want. Now from the utility menu, let's go ahead and select Begin a New Adventure, and the game asks for the program disk in Drive 1 and Scenario Disk 1 in Drive 2. For the scenario disk, I'll use the backup I just made instead of the original. By the way, from now on we can just boot the machine with these 2 disks inserted to continue the game. Now let's finally start our adventure. In Dragonslayer: The Legend of Heroes, you take control of Prince Serios. Apologies to those who have played the English version on the TurboGrafx CD, the names are almost all different here. Prince Serios is just 2 months away from assuming the throne of the Kingdom of Farlane, when his village is attacked by monsters. Serios flees to the castle, only to find that his deceased father's right hand named Akdam has seized control of the kingdom, and that the monsters were meant to be an assassination attempt on Serios by Akdam. Serios' quest to defeat Akdam will take him all around the world of Isel Hassa. Now might be a good time to make clear that the world and characters of Isel Hassa are not related to the Trails games being released today. The Legend of Heroes series is comprised of 3 separate universes which are not connected to each other in any way. In Serios' quest, he will be joined by a number of allies, Ryunan and Sonia, who are members of the Resistance, aimed at bringing down Akdam and restoring Serios to the throne. Ro, a philandering sorcerer who likes to gamble. And Gale, a mysterious man who is captured and forced by Akdam to work in the mines. Also, one character who never joins your party, but is worth mentioning nonetheless, is Princess Dina, Serios' fiancée, who will appear later in the game. Given the game's age, we won't be getting to know any of these characters quite as well as we would characters in more recent games. There are no illustrations of the characters in the game, aside from the opening and ending, and what little characterization exists is conveyed via text-based dialogue between the characters. The amount of character interaction is not too bad compared to other games of 1989, but fans would still have to wait for later entries in the series to see the amount of dialogue gradually get ramped up. So, as you can see from the game footage, Legend of Heroes is a game that heavily draws inspiration from the other JRPGs of its time. To progress, you move your party from one town to the next, sometimes running errands between towns as requested by the people. You may also get to explore nearby dungeons or defeat a boss or 2. This man says that the only way that their town stays peaceful is by regularly sacrificing children to the monsters who live in the cave nearby, and that soon he will have to take his son to the cave to be sacrificed. Man, that's dark. The battle and statistical RPG elements of the game are not exactly deep, even compared to other RPGs of the time. Aside from their differences in HP and MP max, the characters are all fundamentally the same. Any character can use any equipment or learn any spell. So while there are 2 wizard-type characters in the game, you can choose to equip them with a sword instead of a staff. That actually works better most of the time in my experience. And while the warrior-type characters may have lower max MP, they can use any spell in the game. If you want, you can also change to manual leveling mode, which will allow you to increase each character's stats manually at each level up, increasing the opportunity to build your sorcerer into a mighty warrior if you so choose. The simplicity of the statistical elements makes the game easier to learn and power through, but it also makes the battles a little less interesting than they otherwise could be. The battle encounter system in this game isn't completely random. When in the dungeons, you can see the monsters moving around and try to avoid them, while on the overhead map they are invisible until you run into them. There's also an item you can use that will make them all visible. The battle encounter rate in this game can be brutal, and it is one of the more frustrating aspects of the game, especially when your party is weakened and there's somewhere you're trying to get to. One piece of advice I can give, and this is probably obvious to experienced RPG players, is to try not to rely on running from battle very much. You want to make sure your party is strong enough to power through most of the enemies in the game, or you will become frustrated quickly. In any case, a lot of your time with this game will be spent healing your party. While the way the characters look and move is somewhat similar to other Falcom games like Ys 1 and 2, the battle system with its plain black background looks quite similar to Dragon Quest, and other similarities abound. For some reason, JRPGs of the late 80s all had castles that were laid out like this one. And, as was customary in RPGs of this age, you eventually obtain a means to fly around the world map later in the game. Here it takes the form of a dragon. There's also a ship, though you can't control its movement. It only goes between particular ports. Uh-oh, looks like we've been commandeered by pirates. Do I surrender? Hell no, why would I surrender? No. 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 This is stupid. Why do I have to surrender? It's only 5 against 4, and we all have the best equipment available right now. We'll kick their asses.
We kill pirates.
Well, crap. So I guess we need to surrender to progress the game.
Set a course for Hidden Pirate Island.
Are you friendly pirates?
Not really, no.
Actually, yes. These turn out to be friendly pirates who will help you throughout your quest. And you will be needing all the help you can get. There are quite a few spots in the game where a walkthrough comes in handy. Luckily, there are plenty of them out there in both Japanese and English. Oftentimes, the way forward will involve revisiting a location from earlier in the game. Warp items and spells will make this a breeze. As you would expect from a Falcom game, one of the best features of Legend of Heroes is its soundtrack. However, one of my pet peeves that has haunted me throughout this PC-88 video series rears its ugly head again. This game only uses the PC-88's monaural 6-channel soundboard 1, rather than the superior soundboard 2, which was already available by this time. Here are a couple of other PC-88 RPGs from my collection released the same year which both support the soundboard 2. For whatever reason, Falcom didn't start using the soundboard 2 until later releases. However, Legend of Heroes does have one other musical trick up its sleeve. If you had a PC-8801 MC, you could use the system's CD-ROM drive for the music. If you want to know more about how this works or why this PC-88 has a PC Engine CD-ROM drive attached to it, then watch the video I did a few years ago about my PC-8801 MC system. In the game's CD settings, you can select which track number on the CD you want to correspond to each track in the game, so you can literally use anything you want for the music. Later on, arranged soundtrack CDs were also released for Legend of Heroes 1, which you could use as a complete arranged soundtrack for the game. So you could use the Falcom Sound Team JDK Arrange disc from Dragonslayer JDK Special. Or if you prefer, you can use the special arranged disc from Perfect Collection Dragonslayer The Legend of Heroes. Or you could use the original game soundtrack version disc. Wait, no. There's no point to doing that, is there? I tend to not use the CD drive for the music usually, but sometimes switch to it if I get bored of the FM tunes. Unfortunately, the wait time while the CD drive switches between audio tracks does make the game go a little slower. Minigames. Can't have a Legend of Heroes game without some fun minigames, right? How about a game of Othello? Man, I suck at Othello. There's also this weird sort of auto battle minigame. Find the right combination of HP, strength, defense, speed, and then watch an automatic battle play out against the stats your pirate opponent chooses. Another thing this game has in common with more recent Legend of Heroes games is that you have the option to retry any battle when you lose rather than loading your save data. Actually, in this case, it returns you to right before the battle, and you can even try running away from the enemy on the map if you prefer. Another thing that is common to all Legend of Heroes games is that the story is divided into chapters. You'll have to complete all 6 chapters and slay the dragon, as it were, in order to restore peace to the world of Iselhasa and complete the game. As you can imagine, Legend of Heroes 1 was later ported to several other platforms. The initial ports were made to other Japanese PCs. The PC-88 version uses the same low color palette as the PC-88 version. However, the graphics were redrawn to take advantage of the PC-98's 400 lines of vertical resolution rather than just keeping the PC-88's 200. Which is what Falcom had done for all PC-98 ports up to that point. So while this version may be 4 months short of being the original, it does look a little better and is technically a superior version. You probably also noticed that a bunch of function key shortcuts have been added, which are displayed at the bottom of the screen. The FM Towns and X68000 versions sound like they would be awesome, but in reality they are just direct ports of this PC-98 version. So while they are also superior to the original, I've always found it quite disappointing that they really don't take advantage of their respective hardware capabilities. It is worth mentioning that the X68000 version adds MIDI support. The MSX2 port had to have the graphics completely redrawn, since the MSX uses an incompatible lower resolution and color palette. An English patch is also available for this one. The first console port by Hudson on the PC Engine didn't come out until 2 years after the original PC-88 version. Since this version was released in English on the TurboGrafx Super CD and has an awesome CD soundtrack arranged by Ryo Yonemitsu, this is the version most of you are going to want to play. Plus, the cheesy voice acting is priceless.
Listen, Your Highness, I'm sure you need all the help you can get, and I'm willing to give you a hand. But me being a level 7 spellcaster, I got my pride. I can't serve under somebody who's any less than level 6, you know what I mean?
Shortly after came the Super Famicom port by a company called Epoch. They added backgrounds to the battle screen, but the music could have been ported a little better to the Super Famicom in my opinion. Given the Super Famicom's popularity, this was likely the version that many Japanese players played. 2.5 years later, the Mega Drive finally got a late release in Japan in 1994 by Sega themselves. The view is much further zoomed in this version for some reason, but the graphics look nice and the soundtrack was ported quite beautifully, so check out this version too if you get a chance. Normally, this would be the end of the story, but in 1997, Falcom themselves suddenly released Shin Eiyu Densetsu, or New Legend of Heroes, for Windows 95. This one has the standard graphical improvements that you would expect for its age, but otherwise follows the original PC-88 version surprisingly closely, with only some tweaking to the game balance, adjustable difficulty, and a few quality of life improvements. The new CD and MIDI arrangements of the soundtrack are not much to write home about, and there are no voices. For whatever reason, the second game didn't get the same treatment and was never released for Windows. By the way, after quite a bit of tweaking, I was eventually able to get this game to run acceptably on a modern Windows 10 PC, with only a few annoying visual issues remaining in the menus. The following year, a company called GMF released hastily made ports containing both the first two Legend of Heroes games for both the PlayStation and Saturn. The graphics here look far inferior to the Windows version in my opinion. No voice acting again, but the one thing maybe worth checking out here is the weird jazzy arrangement of the soundtrack. Some of the tracks actually sound quite cool. To this day, this is the final remake of the original Legend of Heroes that was ever released. Lastly, I want to give my personal opinions on the original Legend of Heroes. Overall, I think it was a decent RPG for 1989. If you enjoy classic JRPGs, then leveling and making your party stronger can be quite addictive. The characters and graphics are nostalgia-inducing for fans, and the arranged soundtrack on the TurboGrafx Super CD version is still great today. However, I don't want to oversell it either as some kind of genre-defining classic. There were plenty of other JRPGs at the time which offered similar levels of world building and character development. Even on the PC-88 alone, you had games like Emerald Dragon and Burai released the same year, which were arguably just as impressive as Legend of Heroes, if not more. Looking back at the entire Legend of Heroes series now, the first two entries, with their Dragon Quest-style world and battle system, can seem a little bland. They didn't do much to move the JRPG genre forward as a whole. However, the world of Iselhasa did have one major twist to it, which was hinted at in the first game, and wouldn't be fully explained until the sequel. But that's a subject for another video. Jumping ahead again to 1994, the third Legend of Heroes game was released on the PC-88. The Dragonslayer name was dropped, and Legend of Heroes finally became a series of its own. This was the beginning of the Gagarv trilogy, where the series started to show a bit more unique character of its own, including an increase in the amount of character dialogue, which would later come to define the series. For Falcom fans, these three games are a treasure trove of beautiful 90s graphics and sound. However, without going deep into the subject here, let's just say that while I love these games, in my opinion they just aren't for everyone. It wasn't until the 2004 release of Legend of Heroes 6: Trails in the Sky that I think they finally found just the right balance of characters, world building, exploration, and challenge, and this series finally became something that I could wholeheartedly recommend to just about any fan of JRPGs. Thanks for watching this long-awaited edition of PC-88 Paradise. I know it's been years now since I made the previous video, and I apologize. Perhaps now I will have time to make a few more. We'll see. This has been Mr. Jakes from Basement Brothers. Bye-bye for now.